Welcome to Theme Weavers, your weekly wisdom for weaving yoga themes into your classes to inspire your students. We're your hosts, Heidi
and Farin. Welcome to episode 25 of Theme Weavers. Today, Heidi and I are excited to interview one of my teachers and friends, Kellee Williams, about her back pocket theme. In case this is the first episode you're listening to, please check out episode 2 of Theme Weavers podcast for details and background on the structure of how and why to weave themes throughout your yoga classes. But first, we'd like to welcome Kellee.
Yay!
Yeah, hey, Kellee. Kellee is the co-owner of Tower Yoga in Fresno, California, where she offers 200-hour teacher trainings as well as teaches a variety of classes. She's been practicing yoga since she was a teenager and is trained in Ayurveda and so many different styles of yoga. She also hosts women's retreats and an annual yoga and adventure retreat in Peru with her husband and studio co-owner Jameson. I met Kellee in the running community and then became one of the founding members of Tower Yoga when the studio opened 5 years ago. And then when she and Jameson offered a 200-hour YTT, I jumped at the opportunity, and I've been teaching at the studio for almost 3 years, and I'm their studio manager. So I'm super excited to have Kellee on the show because she's not only my boss, but also my teacher, my friend, and my chosen family.
Mm-hmm. This feels like a love letter.
I just love her.
I have tears like in my eyes.
So beautiful.
And then Heidi met Kellee the same time that Heidi met me. She was our mentor for the 300-hour chromatic yoga teacher training. So they have history as well. Kellee and Jameson actually sponsored the entire Tower Yoga staff to go through that chromatic training, and Heidi was our mentor. So Kellee is a phenomenal yoga teacher and human being.
Like one of the most generous, can I add? One of the most generous people I have ever met also, just from what I've come to observe and experience myself. Like I've never met a soul that is just so giving and generous just for the sake of wanting to be there for people.
Yeah.
It really comes through. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. She's also the mom of a 13-year-old daughter and an avid trail runner, mountain biker, and adventure racer. And she's one of the coolest people that I have the honor of knowing. So, Kellee, is there anything I left out?
I don't know. I'm taking that in. That's like medicine I needed for my heart and my soul. But for sure, Farin, I would consider you, I think we have many soulmates in our lifetimes, and that might be romantic and otherwise. And I do believe that in some way that we're soulmates. We have similar timelines of life experiences, lessons, and things like that. So, and then it's really cool because there's obviously such a really deep connection between you and Heidi. And I feel somehow that like I was a little like instrument from God that was like connect these two humans. And I know you two have talked about things like that before, but yeah, when I tap in and I think about that, it just like registers as truth in my body that like you and I were meant to know each other. You were meant to like do this with Heidi, and you have such a beautiful friendship, and it's so cool. But yeah, for sure, it's so the unfolding of our coming together in the way that it is feels like nothing short of destined, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. But no, I don't think you left anything out. I'm like, man, when people ask me like, what do you do? Or like, what are you about? I'm like, nothing. I'm like,
it's really hard to think about that, right? To find everything that you've done that led you to this place right now. So people like really see you and understand you. Like that's hard to sum up.
Yeah.
Whenever I try and do it with John and my husband and I'll have those conversations, and he'll be like, yeah, but you did this, this, and this. Like, don't undercut yourself. I'm like, I don't even remember that those things happened. Like they're not right now. So it's just gone. You need somebody else to do it for you.
I can see why people like have other people write their like bios and stuff, like people who know them like really well. That actually makes sense.
It's a super humbling experience hearing somebody else's view of who you are and what you bring to your life. I remember when I had to write my first bio as a yoga teacher that somebody was like, well, ask your students to describe you and what they think of you in your classes in like 3 words or maybe 3 sentences, and read all of that. And that will help you see the teacher that you are to them and what you deliver to your students and who you are. And I was like, oh, okay, nobody's even going to answer if I put this call out. And they're like, well, you won't know unless you try. and you put it out and you get like the most, like you said, you had chills taking it all. It's amazing to hear how people view you and your experiences and what you've given them.
Yeah.
Super
Yeah,
Huntswood.
it's really good.
All right. So Kellee, in case you haven't listened to Theme Weavers before, on our show, we share yoga themes that are tied to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. We offer tips on how to deliver a Dharma talk on the theme, how to weave a thematic through-line phrase through the class to remind students of the theme, how to match a peak pose or posture with the theme, and how to conclude a class so that the students can continue to reflect on the theme off of their mat and into their lives. And Farin and I go about that. And then we like to also interview other people to get their perspectives on the themes that they like to share. And so when we bring on a guest like today, we try and offer what we call a back pocket theme. So one that you can metaphorically whip out of your back pocket and use for any yoga class of any style, any time of the day, any season, with any posture or sequence in mind. And it just works. You don't need any prep, no preparation time, because you're so comfortable with this theme, especially if you're just like not feeling inspired that day and you want to show up. Like you can just like whip it out and deliver it without too much extra thought. Kellee Williams, what is your back pocket theme? Do tell us.
I have several, to be honest, but the one that is the most present, and I know it's kind of funny because people will be listening to this anytime, but it was just Valentine's Day. And this week in my personal yoga practice, I've dedicated my practice to Ahimsa, right? Non-harming, non-violence. And so that's just what's the most present with me right now. So, and I just taught on that a couple classes yesterday, so I'll go with that. So Ahimsa, it's translated as non-violence. Farin has been like, ooh, that word is a little activating. And I agree. I like to think of it more as like non-harming because it also makes it so that we think about it a little more subtly. When you think about nonviolence, you right away go to like, yeah, like not murdering or stealing someone's car. You know, it's like the big things. When you think of like non-harming, then it breaks it down to the more subtle ways, like the microaggressions that we can inflict on ourselves and others. And so I think that's actually in some ways more insidious and can take and steal life force actually maybe even a faster rate because it's just sort of happening in the background and we're not giving attention to it. So a lot of, I think people also translate that as a way of encompassing compassion and love for all living beings, including the earth as a living being and ourselves. We're in that. And I even asked yesterday, you know, like, hey, like, can you think of a list of people you love in class yesterday? And people were just like in their own mind. And then I said, okay, I'm like, were you on the list? Just checking in. And some people were like, absolutely. And other people were like, oh. And then I'm like,
oh my God, I would never think to put myself on that list ever. Even after doing all this yoga work and all this self work and everything, I would never think to add my name. Never.
I know.
That's so sad. And that's why we talk to ourselves this way also, because we don't recognize that love for ourselves.
And then, you know, the earth too, you know, it's like you, I know it's not a person, but it is a living being. It's a living, breathing thing.
I think it's the things that we take for granted, right? Like we take the fact that we're always going to be there for ourselves for granted because like we are in ourselves, and we take for granted the fact that the earth will always be there to support us because like our brains can't think about the day that like we are killing our planet, and why would it not be here for us? It just doesn't even enter our consciousness. And it's easier to think about the other people in your life that would be there for you.
Of course. And relationships are important. And I'll be honest, I think relationships are the hardest yoga I know of. I think about the time I'm doing like personal work within myself and I think I have something figured out. And then I'm confronted with something that comes up in my partnership or in a close friendship, right? One of the people who's at my round table who does deserve to speak into my life, who does let me speak into their life, like the people that where their opinions do matter, right? I think overall we care a little too much about other people's opinions, but we should care about those select few who've been through us through thick and thin, who've seen us through good times and hard times and seen us in our light and in our shadow too. You know, I think the ability to step back and to think about, okay, am I on that list? Is the earth on this list? All these kinds of things. That's big though, right? So when you're in a yoga class, it's like, come on, we're in a 60-minute asana class. Let's break it down through a thin slice. So how do we practice ahimsa in a 60-minute asana class? And I think that the easiest thing to reach for, like the lowest hanging fruit, is Heidi touched on this, is the self-talk, the internal chatter. What is the point of going and doing a 60-minute asana class and doing all the heart openers in the world to let love in, if you're just beating yourself up or tearing the teacher down or the people around you in your mind? Because here's the other thing. Ahimsa is in thoughts, words, and action, right? But it starts with thoughts. Thoughts lead to words. Words lead to deeds or actions. So I think that when someone's coming for a personal practice, focusing on that internal chatter first, on how am I speaking to myself, that self-talk, is it loving? Is it kind? What are my thoughts towards the person who's guiding me, towards the people around me? Are they loving? Are they kind? And it's a good check. But also we should ask ourselves, like, do I want to be loving? Is loving kindness something that is important to me? Because if it's not, then that's another thing of like, what are we doing? If it's not, then you are just coming to do some stretching to get stronger. That's no problem with that, and if the yoga studio like is close and it fits your price range and you kind of like the vibe, but you're not interested in the whole, eightfold path and all the 8 limbs and all that kind of stuff, I think that someone could still live a really worthy life. They just don't want to like live yoga. That's not bad or good. And none of these things are, like really it's just, it's if you want to accept that and embrace that into your life, which most people do, I think, but that internal chatter is really, really important to kind of get a hold of. I think it's also hard though to just switch and go, okay, yes, like I love myself. Because even if you want to embrace loving kindness, that's like, okay, well, are your thoughts loving? It's like, yeah, but if you've lived a life of not being loving towards yourself, that's a big ask. And I think that love, with like a capital L, like love, it's like a sensation or it's something that you experience, and there's roads or pathways to get there. And one good way to get us towards love and loving kindness, I do think, is compassion, self-compassion. So it's like, hey, and that's what I was saying yesterday, because there was definitely some people where they weren't literally doing it, but I'm a very energetic being and they were doing some like internal eye rolling for sure. I could feel it, and I'm like, I get it. And it's like, okay, well, and if you can't like practice being loving towards yourself or loving towards others, like, can you practice being compassionate towards yourself and compassionate towards others? Just assuming like the best out of yourself and people, even if it's a little disappointing,
I think it's funny, Kellee, because the word love can give people such like, almost like Farin had this reaction to violence, you said, like the word nonviolent. I think love can be a triggering word for people too. And it's so funny. I was listening to Mel Robbins' podcast yesterday, and she was talking about how she ends every episode with like, remember, I love you, I believe in you, and whatever. That's how she ends it. And that like people give her very visceral responses. Either they love it or they're like, ew, why would you say that? You don't love me. You don't even know who I am. And that's when she started talking about the definition of love and what it means and what it is in the dictionary versus what she believes that it is. And her belief is that it means that you see somebody or yourself, right? And you believe in them. Like, I believe that you can do this, that you have the potential to be and do anything that you put yourself to. And I see that in you. And I see that in me. And I see that in the earth. Like you can love every single person that you see because you see the beauty and their potential to be whatever it is that they want. Mm-hmm. And that to her, that is what love is. So you don't have to even know a person to have love.
Yeah, that's a huge spiritual practice. Like seeing everyone as your beloved. Yeah. And of course, on the outside world, boundaries. Like, don't just like walk up to a stranger at the grocery store and be like, hello, beloved. That's happened to me. Like Mount Shasta and weird little towns like that. No, that's happened to me. That's happened to me.
Oh my God.
And I'm just like, whoa.
I could just like be like, hello, police officer. This crazy lady says that I am her beloved.
The funny thing is I did go to like the sound healing thing at her house like later that night. But it was really weird. Like we took a yoga class in the park in Mount Shasta. And yeah, she just came up and was like, wow, hello, beloved. We're having a gathering. And her name was like Heart Song or something. You know, I love it. I love this shit though. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like,
You gobble it up.
gobble it
Love
up.
that.
But there's definitely a big part in me that's like, what crock of crap is this? You know, like I also like it though. It's weird what's happening within me. Yeah, and it was cool. And also it's like, I have my own boundaries and lines that could have been crossed that would make me be like, oh, I'm not into this, right? Like if someone's coming up to you and that kind of thing. But it wasn't inappropriate. It was just weird. And it was kind of cool, you know? So, love it's definitely activating. It's a big activator, you know?
Yeah. So bringing us back a little bit to Ahimsa and kind of like your Dharma talk about Ahimsa, you're talking about like the challenges that arise. It's hard for people to admit that they love themselves or even think to put themselves on their own list of who they love and all that. That's obviously one of the challenges. Are there any more challenges that you find when trying to practice Ahimsa?
Yeah, well, we could think about just like the physical part. Like it's amazing because we are afforded this opportunity in asana to learn our edge somewhere between effort and ease. And it's weird that we don't just like have access to knowing what it is. We do know it, but it's an adventure and we have to pay attention to find it. And so I think that an act of, you know, putting ahimsa in action when you're practicing asana is your ability to listen and like honor your body rather than pushing when you don't have anything to give or backing way off to the point of you're in like la la land because you're not in the practice, you know. Because you love yourself, you want to explore that edge, maybe even the messy edge of the practice. And because you love yourself, maybe you do need to put yourself in the fire a little bit more. Because you love yourself, maybe you do need to back off. And it's like, yo, you're burning up at both ends. Like you can back off from it. That fire's raging, you know? So I think it's an act of actually love to give yourself permission to listen and honor yourself, to take the guidelines of the teacher. And there is something beautiful that's like, I am putting whatever in your hands so that I can take a break from like giving myself direction all day. There's something just beautiful. I love taking classes for that purpose. Not that I'm like giving all my power away, but I'm like, you got it. And, you know, hopefully you have a plan and, you know, but what I'm trying to do and where the real practice is being like, okay, there's a running coach that always says today's legs aren't yesterday's legs.
Yes.
And it's a way of just being like, where we are now isn't where we were yesterday. It's not where we'll be even tomorrow, whatever. And so I like to think about that in my practice and then to go, okay, like where's my edge today? And that edge changes from posture to posture. And I love to imagine like myself with a dial, you know, and I'm dialing it up and I'm dialing it back. And it's hopefully coming from a place of love, right? Because I'm dedicated to having access to knowing like what my edge is on any given day. And when I just sit down, it's like the weirdest thing that I don't know until you start practicing, right? But that's, I think, another challenge because if you haven't developed the ability to listen to your body, the living, breathing thing that it's not a liar. It gets confused, it gets sick, and just like anything, but our bodies they tell the truth and they're like trying to signal to us. It's like that, you know, the body keeps the score. We all know that book, you know, it's like so true. And there's so much to learn from it. And so, yeah, I think that that's another challenge for people that they're either really, really scared because they have been hurt or they are guarded in their physical form. And so exploring their edge feels really scary, or vice versa. They might come from a background like I did, where it's like no pain, no gain. And I don't fully actually not believe in that. I know that's like a hot take and it's kind of radical, but that just that push past. I did that last night actually. The funny enough, I took a class last night after having a really like long day, and I got about halfway into class and I was like, yeah, this was not the most loving choice. So now all you can do, because I'm not going to leave in the middle of a class. And like all you can do now is make the most loving choices you can from here on out.
I have two questions for you based off of this that came up for me. One is, how do you address this with people that, and maybe my brain's going into trauma, right? Like, how do you address this with people that have zero love for themselves whatsoever because they've never experienced it? So that way, when we're saying these things, they're like, that's a crock of shit. Like, I don't love myself. I hate myself most of the time. Like, all I have to do is just like act like I love myself, and there I will. Like, how do you address that without feeling like you're bypassing the burden of what that person is experiencing? So that's one thing. And then the second is sort of similar. Some people have zero proprioception or awareness of their bodies at all. Like, they could be standing on their head and think that they're standing on their feet. Like, they have no sensation or connection because they've had to dissociate from their bodies so much in the past. So like, as a teacher, how would you help them, do you think?
For the first part, I would say like before you love someone, usually you just want to like them.
Yeah.
Right? You usually say like I like them before you say I love them. In your heart, maybe you are practicing that whole spiritual thing of everyone's my beloved. And maybe in your own heart, you're like, I love them very, very much, But what you would say, so you're not a creep, is like, hey, I kind of like you. Like, you feeling me? Like, So I would say before if that is really like, you're like, well, how would I love myself? It's like, maybe a good goal would be more to like yourself. And if that is still too much, then what about like accept? And if you can't accept your whole self, we have many aspects of ourself. Is there one part, I would ask that student, is there one part of yourself, maybe the part that got you here to nourish your mind, body, heart, complex? Can you accept that part of yourself? So maybe if we could start to accept and then like and then love, even if it's just like little part by part. We all have lots of parts. We all have lots of parts.
You sure do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so many parts. And already, like, I'm 35. I've been like 100 different women in my lifetime already, And all are me, little fragmented versions that hopefully by the time I close my eyes for the last time, they've merged back into wholeness or towards it, or as close as I can get before the next time. But that's kind of how I would do more for that. Either that or switch up the conversation more on that like compassion piece. Compassion for the parts of you that can't love yourself, and just remember that we're human. And a good even mantra there would just be like, "Ah, I'm just human.
Just a human.
Just a human.
Just a being, practicing human."
Yeah. And so that's how I would, I think, address that piece. As far as like the student with no proprioception, and yeah, I have a couple students like that. So this is a really good question. I love that you asked that. I think I would probably do some kind of cue, maybe like in standing, for instance, and be like, can you sensitize your feet enough so that you feel the texture of your towel or your mat or the floor underneath your mat? Maybe even like get them to step off their mat if the ground is like, especially if it's like wood or something, because then that's like really, and just try to get them to like connect like that one like body part to like where they are in space time, like maybe kind of with
ground them, help them ground.
Mm-hmm. And then also maybe I would ask them, like, say if we were reaching our arms up and then going into Uttanasana, into a forward fold, I might ask them to like, can you, with the help of your breath, feel as much as you can feel in your body, and just maybe taking it slowing the asana down and reminding them their breath is that tool, and just playing, let it be playful too. And if you can only feel a little tiny, like a bit, that's fine. But can you try, when I think of that, and I know I'm not the only person, I'm in one experience, but when I think about that, when I'm practicing, when I think about feeling myself in a pose and not just like being in a pose, it's like, how does it feel as a body who's in warrior one. When I think about myself feeling and trying to actually, can you feel as much as you can feel? It works. I feel
Mm.
more, and I all of a sudden feel myself more in relation to the room, other people, the ground, the ceiling, the sky. So I feel like the more you can feel yourself into your own self, for whatever reason, it gives you like, it can maybe give you a little bit more access to being like, okay, so if I feel myself in myself, here I am. And if I know where I am, I know where up is, I know where down is. The thing is when we lose when we ditch our bodies, and a lot of people do, they hightail it. They get to class, they go, there's my teacher, and I'm out. And their bodies are
Yeah.
there, and their spirit left the building, because it's just been a lot. And so it's that thing of like, how can someone really if they can't feel themselves in themselves, then how do they know where they are in relation to the sky, to the ground, to other people? When I notice people, and it might not always be that, because it could be hormonal, it could be so many different imbalances or just things going on. So I know this is the only reason, but I happen to notice that with those kinds of people, and because I can be like this, I recognize it. I'm like, oh, you are not in your body. You take off. You're in the clouds. I like to live there too, so I can see it. I can like sniff that shit out like in a heartbeat.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that the more you can invite people into themselves and in that like internal experience, all of a sudden they have more of a reference point. It's like when you're like hiking and you have a map. If you don't know where you are, it's hard to know where you come from and where you're going. But if you know where you are, you can go, okay, well, I can backtrack in order to understand where I've been. Or I can look at the landscapes based on from where I am, and that ridge right there, I know where I need to go, right? But if you don't have that access point of knowing where you are on that map, it doesn't matter. You could have the map, you could see everything around you. It's not going to make any sense. You're not going to have a way to like connect it all. I think that's a huge thing.
I think so. And what I hear you say also is like by using almost external landmarks outside of yourself, it helps you feel more within yourself, right? So like looking for that ledge helps you see like, oh, I've moved forward because the ledge is getting closer. So in the room, it's like reach your arm out and see how much closer your fingers get to the edge of the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Now reach a little bit further and see how that expansion gets you closer. And now feel what that feels like in the center of your chest as your arm is expanding.
Mm-hmm.
So like using the external to go a little bit more internal. I like that.
And you mentioned like the word trauma, so we can go there. I know it's like a hot topic, like word, and it's even funny how you're allowed to use it when you're like doing teacher trainings and stuff like that. But when I did a really accessible yoga training, and it was really cool. And
Mhm.
that is one way that you can also teach a little more trauma informed, is by really naming the landmarks. Even before you get going, you can even invite people to like find a spot in the room that they can always return to. So it's not just like, hey, come into child's pose if you need a second. It's like, and find that tree, that plant, that stone, that whatever, and come back to it. So there must be something, there could be something there too with trauma related. I think when people have a hard time really knowing where they're at in time and space and the room and
Yeah, in trauma we dissociate to protect ourselves. So when we can help people feel the safety of the container that we're creating in a yoga space to allow them to come back, even if for just a moment, to feel where that wall is
yeah.
or feel the sensation of the big toe on the ground while we're keeping them safe, they can come back in a little bit, even if they have to leave again, because it's just not going to last for them at that moment. Even if we can give them just a glimmer of what it's like to feel the ground beneath you and the community around you.
And speaking on like safety and stuff like that too, if someone has gone through something really where they feel like their body has failed them, I think it's nice to be able to also give all those kinds of cues of like go to a wall space, set your mat up. That also is a way of practicing self-love in your practice, is giving yourself the opportunity to get that extra support if you need it.
Totally. Totally agree. All right. So this is so beautiful. And I love how this conversation went from nonviolence all the way toward like how we ground and make ourselves feel safe in a room. So this brings us a little bit more into the actual physical practice, right? So if we're in an hour-long class and we're offering this beautiful Dharma talk and teaching, then we want to bring it into the asana a little bit. We want to bring it into the poses so that way they can live it and breathe it and experience. So Kellee, what do you think? Maybe it's what you taught yesterday or something else. Like, what would a practice on Ahimsa look like? What peak pose might you use? And then do you use, I know that you were chromatic trained also, so do you use a thematic through line or a phrase that you can come back to and keep like dropping the hammer to bring it back to your Dharma talk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The theme was definitely around self-talk. And so I kept bringing it back into check in with your internal chatter, check in with that self-talk, and just notice. And, before we talked about, I had in the Dharma talk, let everyone know about what the theme was, ahimsa, how you could translate that. If love's a little weird, maybe go with like compassion, that kind of thing. And so that they already knew what they connected to, so that when they were brought back into throughout the course of class, remembering what the theme was, they could use that as like the guidepost to organize their thoughts in alignment with that. So that was something that I would just invite them back into, is continually paying attention to that internal chatter. The two classes I taught yesterday were a little different because they weren't vinyasa. It was a lift and flow with weights that has a very interesting perspective. And I was trying really hard to get like an heart opener class, but with like weights and exercises, I'm like, no one can see me. I'm like doing like a little like chest bump, like over and over and over. I was trying to figure it out. And you know what? I ended up just going, okay, my husband's about to go on a really big bike ride, like a 400-mile bike ride. He's trying to do it in a couple days. And he was telling me how he feels like his hip flexors are weak. So my theme, like physically, was on the hip flexors. And I was like, but that's coming from a place of love because I love my husband and I want his hip flexors to be strong. So that's how I did that. And I told the class that I'm like, this is what our theme is like physically. We'll be
Was JMO there?
No, we took class together later that night, but I was just letting know people like where I was coming from. And I'm like, and we can all use like stronger hip flexors, right?
I love that you offer a theme through even a different style of class, through a lift and flow. Like the fact that you're still and especially nonviolence where you're like pumping and like going and doing and fast and like, how can you keep that?
Yes. And so and same thing, because people will push and the music's like loud. And I do encourage people to like mess with their edge and like almost like juke with it. Like it's a little like intense, but we have all the safety talks and stuff before. So, so that's how that worked. And then with gentle, I didn't necessarily do like one peak pose. Sometimes I do in gentle of like a heart opener, right? But I did a lot of just gentle heart openers. And the like theme was like letting love in. If that word was weird, they could use whatever they want, but just kind of like letting it in. And so we put our hands on our heart in between class. We stopped and I asked people to like send a love letter to themselves in the same way that they might have texted or sent a card or said something to someone else, to like do it like from me to me. XOXO, and had people kind of do that like in between. That's how I themed that, of just like every gentle heart opener I could think of, bringing it in.
I love that. I love it. And you know what my brain is going to? This entire like Dharma talk and class, you could also flip it and it's contentment. Like it's the different Yama, right? Like where the positive version of Ahimsa, right? Like we're telling you not to be violent, and then we're teaching you what to do to be compassionate and loving and caring. And it's interesting how they all overlap. And if you shift around, it just is a different teaching within the same realm.
They 100% do, because I could very much see this all like a parigraha too, of like not taking more than you need or not. There's just so it all interlaces.
It's just all living life as a yogi.
Mm-hmm.
I told my students this morning that you could be on your yoga mat for this hour and actually not practice yoga the entire time, even as you're moving your body through shapes. Or you could choose to, for the next 24 hours as you walk throughout your day, regardless of the shapes that you're taking, be practicing yoga with trying to understand how to be more present, to still the thoughts, to go beneath the fluctuations of the mind and be here in this moment. If you're not doing any of that, but you're going into a warrior two, you're just like flexing your knee while abducting your legs and reaching through your finger. Like you're not actually practicing yoga, even if you're taking the shapes. So how can everything that you're doing be part of this practice?
It's so true.
It's the same
I
with you.
used to, and sometimes I'll still get hard on myself if it's been a couple days and I haven't really tended to my own practice. And part of it is because I want to be able to like teach from a place of like authenticity. And if I'm teaching asana, I want to be practicing asana. But, I also have to like just step back and give myself like a break. Sometimes it's like, you are living this like 24 hours a day. Hey, maybe not in the best way, maybe not in the best way, but it is, I am practicing hardcore like every day, day in and day out. So yeah, my asana practice might look like a quick little 15 minutes sometimes. And it's like, yeah, but that's just asana. And it's even gotten to the point where I really like want to decipher that kind of stuff. Like, this is my asana practice. Like, I practice asana maybe 1 hour a day, and I practice yoga like all day or something like that. But it's true, you can go to class, and you're so right. Now, is it still a worthy thing to do? Sure. I was even in teacher training last weekend because I taught on the niyamas and the yamas, and I said, is there something missing from a physical practice if you're not incorporating these? And I said yes. I said yes. I do think that there's something missing. Is it wrong? Is it bad? Should you not do asana if you are not interested in incorporating these teachings and living your yoga? No, of course not. And it comes back to intention. Like, what's the intention?
Plus, sometimes you find it backwards, right? Like when I first started practicing, I didn't know that yoga was anything besides taking a posture that I'm moving my body into and like going on the struggle bus. Like I thought that's what yoga was. And then the more I did it and the more I got myself into postures, the more all of a sudden the teachings actually came to me. But that was not my intention, or it was not even mentioned to me as part of the practice. It was like a byproduct that came later that then you could dive into. I think a lot of people enter that way.
It does, especially in the West. It's such a doorway. But if you are practicing earnestly and consistently, you will get to a point where not only have you heard about these words and phrases and things, like, I can tell you for the longest time, I'm like, what's Ayurveda? You just hear like things in passing, but you get to a point where you go, there's got to be more. There's just got to be more. And then it's like, oh, what do you know? Yep. Of course there is.
Especially because you're feeling it. Like you might not have the words for it, but you're starting to feel the more. And then you're like, what is happening and why?
Yeah, for sure.
This is so good. I love this conversation. And I see you, Kellee. I see you practicing your yoga 24/7. And I just want to acknowledge that like, I really do see it and I love it. And it's very inspiring. So, but just pretend like you're wrapping up a class, and it's kind of like we've already been talking on this, but you're wrapping up a class. Students are getting out of Shavasana or, whatever, leaving their mat. What do you say at the end of the class to remind them of the practice, specifically of Ahimsa?
I would let them know, like, just to observe first before when we come up, bring it to awareness, that observer mind, which is really truly like my big back pocket theme. we can do another podcast another time, but it's being in that.
You're welcome back anytime, Kellee. Anytime. This is a delight.
being that witness, right? Or that observer, right? Of being like, I would inhale and know that you are inhaling. Exhale and know that you are exhaling. So it's moving from something that you're just doing to being. And then I would ask them, once they're dropped into that observer place, to notice the effects of the practice of letting love in, of cleaning up their self-talk and that internal chatter, right? And give them a moment to notice those effects. And then the invitation would be to take that off of their mat. Notice their internal chatter and judgments, thoughts with other people. Notice that in the words that they use, and taking it into their actions. I think I even gave an example when I was opening in the Dharma talk. I know we're talking about closing, but yesterday, because I could tell there was a couple people that were like, make it make sense for me, like what you're talking about. I can get rambly, as we've seen. And it was like, practicing ahimsa could just be noticing that when someone comes and puts their mat down a little too close to you and you shoot them a glare and you're like, or like they're a little late, right? And we all got our spots. Now you're like, we were all here and like we had our spots and now you're trying to come in and shove in and I got to be closer to this person who kind of smells, whatever, right? It's all there. It's all, right? Like it happened. And everyone started busting up laughing, which tells me something, which tells me that we're all doing that,
Yeah, they're totally relating to everything that you just said. We are all the person that does that.
And so it could be just making that catch and just going, oh, okay, practice ahimsa, assume the best out of people. They got here. Who knows what kind of day they had? Give them some compassion. There's room, right? Like when I was in India, our mats were like overlapping, and I was just like, whoa, like no personal space, like in general, even just in the culture, which is fine for me because I'm not a huge bubble space kind of person. But yeah, so it's just that is, another way that I would close out the class is first like bring them up, get them into that, remember to get them into that like witness or observer role, observe the effects of the practice of letting love in and practicing ahimsa, and then inviting them to take that off and into the world. And the thing though is they really just I would invite them to really continue. And this is what I did yesterday is just keep it about you. Keep it about the internal, because if you really are practicing that wholeheartedly, it will emanate. You don't have to think about being nice to other people and being loving and kind. And I really need to not stop being such a biatch, to my husband or whatever. Like all these kinds of things. Like it will, if you are truly practicing that from the inside out, it's like a byproduct. And so it's like, yeah, like let some of the pressure off of being like, I got to know how to control my behavior with this person and that person. And it's like, bring it back in, trust and believe that it will emanate very naturally through you. It always goes back to self.
Yeah, I love what you're saying also about, it's almost like you're telling them what to do instead of what not to do. And I think that really helps people and gives them direction also when you're teaching, to give people ideas of how to do this rather than what not to do. Mm-hmm. Makes a big difference too. So I appreciate that. This is awesome, Kellee. So awesome. First of all, you're just like a delight to talk to, and I miss talking to you. So this is just lovely having you on as a guest. But Farin and I, what we do next is we condense all of this, your teaching on Ahimsa, into an inspo sheet. So our listeners can grab it on our website, themeweaversyoga.com/episode 25. We'll have the link in the show notes too, in case you want to find them there. And then other teachers, you can use that inspo sheet to bring Kellee's back pocket theme of Ahimsa alive in your own voice, your own practicing, your own teaching. Like maybe it's the words about love. Maybe it's something different that speaks to you from her inspiration.
Yeah.
Cool. I love that. I love that you have that available.
Cool. So Kellee, if our listeners want to find you online, where do they go? Who do they follow? How can they take a class with you?
I am at Go Kellee Go on Instagram. And
wait, you should spell your name because you don't spell Kellee like my brain would spell Kellee.
That's so true. It's really fun. I think it's GoKellEego. So Go Kellee Go @gmail.com. And it was really fun when I was learning to write my name in cursive. I was just like, whoa.
I love writing your name in cursive. I love it.
It really.
Wait, hang on. Now I'm going to take a pen and write your name in cursive.
It's so fun. It fits my personality. The spelling of my name really fits my personality. I feel like.
That's fun, except for I just spelled your name with a Y at the end. Why would I do that? I still did 2 E's and a Y. I just added a Y.
Kellee.
Your name I just wanted to keep going with the loopies.
Yeah, and then you can find me at Kellee Williams, spelled Kellee Williams, on YouTube. And you can practice in person with me if you're ever in Fresno, California, at Tower Yoga. And also you can practice with me. I still have a couple spaces for my women's retreat that happens in Palm Springs area. That's happening in April, the first weekend. It's a Thursday through Sunday. And also we have some space available left for our Peru treat. We do Machu Picchu, we hike, we do yoga, we stay in the Sacred Valley, we do lots of fun excursions even outside of Machu Picchu and go to other sacred sites. It's really, really beautiful. A lot of the Andean wisdom tradition parallels with the yogic wisdom tradition. So if that the yogic wisdom tradition in general is something in the philosophy like speaks to you, it would be very, very interesting to start to learn about some of these things from the Incas. And it's just really, really cool. But it's a place that almost feels like a second home to me at this point. We've been going back since 2017 and developed really strong roots and connections. We love traveling, my husband and I, and we always want to like explore new things, but we wanted to pick one place that we were going to kind of like dedicate our lifetime to pouring into and nourishing relationships and giving back into like the community. And so Peru, the Andean wisdom tradition, Machu Picchu, some of these other sacred sites, it's part of my devotional practice, along with studying the philosophies of yoga. It's something that I dedicate a lot of time and thought and energy to learning about and thinking about. And it's really cool. They even have their own Incan chakra system, and it gets wild. It's awesome. They speak on Kundalini, but in different terms, and it's really, really, really beautiful. So if you just love adventure and you love yoga and you love just experiencing new cultures and mountains and like energy and you would love it.
I love those things.
Go.
When is this trip, Kellee? When is it?
It's in July. I don't know the exact dates because other people in my life know those things for me. At this point.
I feel like one of them is on the screen right now.
Yeah, let me check really quick. July 3rd through 12th is the retreat, and you can find it at toweradventures.com.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Tower Adventures.
You can follow that on Instagram too?
Yes, yeah, it has its own Instagram, and we have a website and all that kind of stuff. And we have more retreats and stuff that we want to offer in the future. We have running retreats, like running and yoga retreats that I would love to do some kind of, I don't know, like poetry or writing retreat somewhere down the line would be awesome. And we are also scoping a couple other places that are both stateside. And there's a fun, exciting place after we go to Peru. We have some friends who have retreat centers in Costa Rica. So we're hoping to stop through there this year and kind of put our feelers out for Costa Rica. So, wow.
All right. So follow all of these things: Tower Yoga, Tower Adventure, Kellee Williams, Go Kellee Go, all the things. Cool woman over here. Follow her.
You can also reach out to us, Theme Weavers Yoga, on Facebook, Instagram, or email. Let us know how Kellee's back pocket theme lands with your students, because we're here to support you, our fellow yoga teachers, in your class prep and delivery. Let us know how we can be of the most support. Tune in next week for another episode of Theme Weavers. Wait, Heidi, this is the end of season 1, no?
Oh my God, is it? We're dropping it. This is what you're left with until we decide season 2 begins.
Yeah.
This is your lasting impression.
We're taking a little hiatus, and then we'll be back. But you have 25 episodes now to listen to of themes that you can use in your classes. So I hope those 25 themes serve you well. But until next time,
we weave you in peace.
That's cute.
We're cute. We're cute.